Hey, I can't hear you though.
How about now?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
let me close my door. Hang on just a second.
Nice. Yes. And I had I'm glad that worked. I'm not sure if I had just said that wrong or what. And now I am having a challenge. I was gonna do the Facebook live stream on my group page and it's just twirling. So that's interesting. So oh well.
I know nothing about this stuff. I did have a moment of panic and I was like, oh my gosh, did I miss it yesterday? So then I scrolled up and I was like, it looks like Friday.
Yeah. No, it's Friday. Let's see why. Okay.
So that next year with the support that I had on the lead generation side, I closed 110 units, all buyers and no showing agents. And that year was super interesting because it was easier that year than the first year. The first year that I closed 49 units was harder. And it was because of the leverage that we had in place. It was the coaching that I had that really helped me time block what that looked like. I mean, I have 2 little kids. I'm busy with other things. And that year I was really only working 2 nights a week and one of the weekend days. So what happened, the reason the showing agent model came around was our director of lead generation at that time, she was building a team within a team and she was doing really great things for within the lead generation world. And I was her ceiling. We could either add another buyer agent or we could add showing agents. And I didn't want another buyer agent. I didn't necessarily I didn't want to have to compete. I wanted to have the opportunity to build my team within the team. So we looked at, okay, we had heard one person on stage one time talking about the showing agent model, and 6 months later they were out of business. So there was nobody to really help with the exception of my coach, Dan's coach. And so we looked at it and we were like, okay, I can't be the ceiling for lead generation. They can't book any more appointments. And if they can't book any more appointments, they can't make any more money. And that's not fair. So in 2016, I added my first showing agent in January of that year. She's still on our team. And the goal was, we're gonna figure out a way to do this so that it's not a high turnover position. So I added Kathleen at the beginning of that year, and I added a second one halfway through that year. And I think we closed 182 units in 2016, the 3 of us. So I was the lead buyer specialist, had the 2 showing agents, and that's just the buy side units. I mean, our team was closing, I don't remember, 300 some, maybe 350. We were typically a 55-45 split as far as the business goes. And I kept those same key players in place for 2017, and we closed 223 units. The following year, I added an EA. So I was kind of trying to build out almost like a 7th level business on the buy side. So I added an EA that year, and we continued to kind of hit the ceiling of this 225 units with the 3 of us. So what's happened now is I took over as our CEO about a year ago. Dan loves production and he loves going on the listing appointments, and he does not necessarily love 411s or accountability, those types of things. So we kind of switched roles, and I replaced myself on the buy side. So this year we should close roughly 300 units on the buy side without me being in production. Was that too fast, too slow, too much information?
Yeah, I know I took tons of notes. So no, that's huge. So I have a couple questions for you, and I'm sure some of the others will as well. So so one of the things that you said, right? So I wrote down actually like work-life balance. So with building all of this, you gave us an idea of like when you did the, what was it, 2016, you were doing it with just 2 nights a week?
That was 2015. 2015. Yep.
So 2 nights a week. How did you set up your schedule so that you were not showing all the time? How did that work?
Well, a lot of things happened ahead of that. I mean, when we talk about being in your 20%, I think people want to be where I was then without having done what I did before it, right? So I had no parameters on my life the 2 years before it, and something had to give. So really what happened was I had great people in place on our team. I had admin support that they legitimately took everything off my plate that was not dollar producing. So for example, I had someone type up contracts for me. Keep in mind that was really the first year of Dotloop. So we weren't using Dotloop, and I was signing all of those contracts in person. But I had somebody writing up the contracts. I had somebody, if I was in the field, they would pull covenants and restrictions. They were in my email. They could email things out. They were setting up my showings. So, I mean, for anybody that's worked with buyers, the worst thing is you get through a hard day of showings, you get home at night, you're finally home, and someone sends you a text message with 3 houses they want to see the next day. And all of a sudden you're not home anymore. You're like, I'm home, but I'm not paying attention. I've got to call these sellers. I've got to map it. I've got to set the showings. I've got to organize this. All of that was taken off my plate. So when I got home and someone said, hey, I'd like to look at these 2 to 3 houses, great, we'll get it set up. I'll confirm with you in the morning a time. But I would just send that to the admin so that they could help me set that up. Well, the other piece of that was lead generation. The thing that bogs us down are that we've got to do lead generation. The thing that bogs us down though, or that we lose people, is the lead follow-up. So when you look at lead generation on the buy side, it's not so much as that they're making cold calls, and it's not the same as the listing side. They're not calling for sell by owners. I mean, they're not doing all those things. However, though, we know it's 19 months from when a buyer hits our funnel to they're actually genuinely a buyer. Well, in 19 months, I can really mess up. In 19 months, I can forget somebody. In 19 months, I cannot check in on somebody. So what our lead generation team did was they really started capturing those leads in a more systematic approach, and then building out those touch programs. So when I got my time back, that was a big part of it, because it feels chaotic as a buyer's agent because we're in a reactive position. That piece of it, doing that piece before I had a showing agent, put me in the position to be proactive. It put me in a position to run it like a business instead of like a real estate agent. All of those pieces had to line up though in order for me to handle the amount of business I was doing with the time constraints. The other thing that happened was that was the year I hired a maps coach. And I know, Olivia, you talked to your clients about it. I had to send him my calendar every day, and he looked at it, and it was basically, here's the time that we're allowing and how are you going to fit it all in. So it got to the point when, before we had lead generation leverage, I had an egg timer, and I would put it on my desk because when I was on the phone, I took too much time. I would have a very warm, fuzzy conversation with people. And then at the very end, I'd ask for business. And then I'd feel like I had to have a warm, fuzzy conversation again. And he helped me change the format of the call. Ask for the business, then be warm, fuzzy, and then get off the call in 2 to 3 minutes. We also revamped our buyer consult at the same time. And so I went from showing, 6 to 7 houses a buyer to 2 to 3 houses a buyer. That's how you service more people, is you condense the showing time. And the benefit of that is the more houses you show somebody, the less likely they think you're the expert, right? So they don't think they're your friend. They don't love you more because you showed them more houses. At a certain point, they start to question you. So we got into the habit during that consult of setting the expectation of, hey, we really should only be looking at 2 to 3 houses. And that's seller's market or buyer's market. You can set up that expectation. Those were, though, there were so many things that we did to kind of alleviate the time. Those were probably the biggest pieces that made the most impact. So if somebody was taking something away from today, get control of your schedule, get control of those buyers, set the expectation that it's okay for them to only look at 2 to 3 houses. Your consult better be pretty good, though, to make sure that you can get it to those 2 to 3 houses.
Yeah, very cool. No, I love that. And so one of the things that you just mentioned was the consultation. So how do you get them to the office? And what if they won't come to the office? What do you do?
So now it's a little different. When I was doing it, clearly the lead was coming into me, and it was almost easier when I was taking the lead to get people into the office at that point, because there wasn't a pass. It was just, they're calling me, I'm talking to them. And I would typically, just be very straightforward and say, you know what, I want to make sure to utilize all of your time. If you can come in the office, not only can I show you 123 Main Street, but based on what you're telling me on the phone, I actually think there may be another option or two that are better for you. And if we could come to the office, let's talk about it, kind of go through what this looks like, so you're really, really comfortable with this situation. Now we've got a team of lead generators and ISAs that are our inbound salespeople, so people that are the receiving calls. They'll start to do the consult on the phone, and they make them really comfortable, and they provide value very quickly. They talk to them about the benefit of doing the consult in the office, especially for a first-time home buyer, somebody that's really nervous. And what we've found is fierce conversations, right? It's the conversation, it's the relationship. The longer you can keep them on the phone, the more value you can provide them, the more conversational it is. We don't really push for the pre-qual on the phone. That's much easier to get in person for them to meet with a lender. I don't care if they're not pre-qualified if they're coming into my office. I don't care if they're qualified now, or I can get them qualified a year from now. My conversion rate goes up if I see them in person. So the questions that kind of make people shy away on the phone, we do leave for the in-person consult. It takes 30 minutes to do a great consult, and they're coming to us. Now, somebody that's like, hey, I just want to see this house and it's your listing. No one loves this answer, but being 100% transparent, I'll show one house. We know, Gary said at family reunion, 75% of people work with the first agent that they meet. So if on the phone, we can answer safety questions, and we can, if they're like, hey, I am pre-qualified, if they're giving the indicators of, hey, I've done this, I keep losing out on houses, I just want to see this one house, our fiduciary responsibility is still to our sellers if it's our listing. So we will give them one house. And what we do is we typically on the phone, our inbound sales are really trained to dig pretty deep in that conversation. They will try to do a rough consult on the phone and try to see if they can't add value or potentially find another home, so that we can say, hey, but you're missing this. You're not getting to see all this. If you work with us, you can see these other things. And then when our agents go out into the field, they do the consult in the house. So our ISA on the phone may say, great, our lead field agent is Cody Costello. He's so excited to meet you at the house. I know that you don't want to come in the office and do a consult. We completely understand. Is there any way that you could build in an extra 10 minutes while we're at the house just to see if we can't help you? And so then what happens is Cody's in the house. He does a great job on the showing. He provides value. And then those last 10 minutes, they just hang out in the house, and it's very conversational. He's not doing the consult questions when he first walks in. He's showing the property. That's what they've asked him to do. And then those last 10 minutes, he'll say, hey, I know that, when Ashton set this appointment up for us, she talked to you about maybe going through some things. Do you have those, do we have that 10 minutes? I just want to be respectful of your time. By the time they're done with the showing, they're pretty willing to give you the info.
Okay. Very nice. I love that. Okay. So it's actually multiple ways to get to the results, and yet ultimately that's what that looks like. Okay. Now the other question that I had, so when you first hired your admin, at that point you were doing around how many transactions?
50.
50. Mm-hmm. Now was that EA specifically for you, or was that a team EA?
So at that point, I didn't have an EA until after the showing agent. So at that point, it was somebody that was already part of the team. What we did is, Dan and I had the conversation of, clearly my production numbers I'm hitting every standard that you've given me. Would there be a way to have some additional admin support? So the team did help provide that, but I didn't have them full time. He was at the point where he had a couple of admin, and I was able to utilize one of them for a few hours a day. And then at that point, you know, we did get to the point where once I had the showing agents and we were, you know, doing a lot of units, that point I paid the EA salary, executive assistant, I think somebody just asked. So yes, I'm referencing an EA as an executive assistant. So that person, initially it was just an overflow admin. And then later when I added the executive assistant, that was just somebody that worked solely for me, was in my email, and I paid that salary. The team did not.
Okay. All right. And then your lead gen support, whenever y'all went to the ISA first, how did you find that person, and was that did they lead generate for the entire team, or were they just lead generating for you?
So she initially came in to help Dan on the listing side, and then I was drowning, and she came to me and she said, you know, I would like some opportunity on the buy side. I have, you know, she had been on the team about 6-7 months, had built out our systems for lead generation on the listing side. She was like, I've got extra capacity. Well, our sign calls are 25% of our business. And I was really nervous to give it to her because, you know, it was easy to take the call and book myself. Well, once I saw what she was doing on the listing side, though, I was like, you know, she is in the office. Those calls are going to get answered faster. So when she transferred over the buy side, I took her on appointments with me. I let her come on showings with me. I had her sit on consults with me. I had her sit in on when we were doing offers, writing them up, because there's so many questions from buyers right off the bat. I mean, they want to know what the steps are. They want to know what's going to happen. We've got to be able to tell them, we live in a rural area. Does the house qualify for an FHA loan or USDA? So I needed her to know that on the front side. So her scripts on the phone came from mine in the field, and she was better at it. I mean, she got to the point where there was so much repetition that she sounded exactly like me on the phone, if not better. And, you know, she came up with the term, she used to call it partners in production. It was right about the time that Tim Heil and Anna Kruger and all those wonderful people were coming out with this ISA OSA model. We didn't know what it was called. We just knew we needed help.
Yeah. Okay. Very cool. So I love it. Like, so it wasn't like, because I think that sometimes what happens is we hire somebody in a position and we go, well, they're not doing a good job. You actually said, okay, these are the things you need to do. Like, here's our training program. You're going to go run with me.
Yeah. And I think part of it wasn't like she was starting from scratch. We had leads that we couldn't service. I mean, they were coming in. It wasn't like we were, you know, I was a brand new agent that had never held an open house and I didn't have a pipeline of people. I also set her up for success. I gave her everything, whether it was a past client or, you know, a friend of mine. We did set it up where I let her, that's a hard job. And I tried to let her have some easy early wins too. And it was interesting. I look at it and I'm like, I would never have been able to do the number of units that I did if she hadn't been in that role.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That's awesome. And so we've got the, where did she come from? Like, what was her background?
She had been in corporate sales, worked in call centers, did those types of things, but she was like business to business sales. She actually came from, it was a listing agent that we had on our team at that time. They had worked together in a call center.
Okay. Okay. Very cool.
She's not with our team anymore. She's actually a MAPS coach now, which is awesome. She's doing well with that. Our director of lead generation now, she had hired her, and she's still on the team, and they all came from kind of that either recruiting background or previous sales experience.
Okay.
Nobody had any real estate experience though.
Yeah. Well, and I think that seems to be for the ones that I'm familiar with like ISAs that are highly successful, it's not really the real estate piece. We can teach that. It's do you already know how to do sales?
That's right. Are you okay to get on the phone and have those conversations and get hung up on and restart? And it's really the foundation of our business. When I say that Dan didn't treat the buyer agent role as a less than role, it's the same with lead generation, right? That's not a lessening role. It's not really a stepping stone for our team. There's a way to thrive in that role and stay there for a long time.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's really cool. And so, okay, so we've talked a little bit about work-life balance. We've talked about bringing in the ISA. Where does your business come from?
So we have been a young team for a long time until now. Now it's like we've flipped the switch where we've been in business together for 7 years. And so it's always been predominantly, the listing side has always been predominantly for sale by owners and expireds. Sorry, my office is really loud on Friday afternoons, if you can hear that. Typically it's been for sale by owners and expireds. And then we really didn't do a whole lot with our database until about 3 or 4 years ago. So now we're making big improvements with that. And we're still, I think, at 40% repeat referral, and the rest of it is new business. I don't know that we ever want to be the team that's 80% repeat referral, because we're still growing. At some point, I think you get to the stage where maybe that's what you're after. And we still want to do big stuff. So you need the balance of, okay, we need our database to provide 55% of it. So we've got work to do there. And I don't know that we want any more of it to be that, because we still want to be getting the new business from for sale by owners and expireds.
Okay, awesome. And so when you were completely just leading that by team, you're the agent, you've got 2 showing partners. How did y'all balance, like, did you show any at all? How did you know who was going to show who, and did they set in on the consultations? Like, what does that look like?
Those are great questions. I typically did not have them sit in on the consultation. The reason being is because I didn't know yet who was going to show them. So once a showing agent has a client, they don't switch. So once it's theirs, it's theirs. So, Cody's client wouldn't meet Kathleen's. So unless somebody were sick or something else. Yeah, I actually did still show. So typically how I would decide is I would do the buyer consult. And then if there was one that I was like, hey, this personality really matches better with this person, I would 100% try to set it up that way. Second, though, was what the schedule looked like. What did the client schedule look like? Whose schedule matched with that? So the showing agents, they typically worked opposite schedules. One of them worked, say, Monday, Wednesday from 8 to 5, and the other one worked Monday, Wednesday, noon to 8. So I had morning coverage and I had night coverage. And then Tuesday, Thursday, it was the opposite. And then they each worked one of the days of the weekend. It wasn't that clean because they always had a day off during the week too. But if Cody was off, then Kathleen's schedule would have been noon to 8 because the evenings were the harder to cover. Now, will I handle a showing? Absolutely. I'm a member of a team. If somebody is sick or double booked, I would still jump in and go do that. I never take it first though. So there's not a person that cannot be passed. So if it's a past client, if it's luxury, if it's a friend of mine, they still get passed just the same as a lead coming into the team. So I never wanted anybody to think I was cherry picking things. So if it was a luxury client and I didn't think somebody was ready for them, I used it as a training opportunity and I still paid them on it. I had them shadow me so that we could get the time under our belts. But yeah, that was pretty much it. And I know other people that have them sit in on the consult. If you just had one, I get that might be beneficial. They could learn it really quickly. The only thing about that though is if they're sitting in the consult, they're not in the field. So you're not doubling your time. If I'm in a consult, I can get new business while Kathleen is servicing the business we already have. So if that makes sense, I didn't necessarily always want us to be in the same place at the same time.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now you mentioned pass. So how do you pass?
Always up, right? It's always so exciting that somebody else is joining us in our process. So very clear expectations when we're doing the consult. I still do it. I'll go into the consult and I'll say, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, because I'm still in the seller's market. So Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, we are so excited to get to work with you. And you know what? I just want to make sure that you know that things are moving so quickly. And I never want to be the reason that you don't get to get into a home that might be your forever home. So occasionally what will happen is that there's another agent on my team that might need to step into the showing. And honestly, if you get to meet them, you'll like them better than you like me. They're in the field all the time. They show more houses than I show. So there is the potential that I won't be the one showing you the property. Are you comfortable with that? I'll still be involved. I'll still help run comps. I'll still know what's going on. Is that going to be okay? Oh yeah. And I'm just, okay, great. And then we move on. It's not a big deal. I don't stall out on it. I don't make it seem awkward.
So it's like an assumptive close. This is what's going to happen.
This is what's going to happen. And it may or may not happen. It's really almost always going to happen. But then what happens is when we find them their house, so keep in mind, I'm only showing 2 to 3 houses.
Yeah.
So if we're only showing 2 to 3 houses and I do a consult on a Monday and I do their home search on a Monday afternoon and we select the 3 houses that they're going to see on Tuesday and Kathleen takes them out and it all works like it's supposed to, and they find their house out of 3. Well, I call them back on Tuesday and say, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Kathleen said you found this amazing house. I'm right back in it. I've only missed a short window. If they don't find the house, then I call and I say, oh, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I'm so sorry. I missed something in the consult. I really thought 123 Main Street was going to be it. Kathleen said you guys got there. The bedroom situation didn't quite work out. Do you care to go back through with me your criteria so I can make sure to do a better job next time? I take the full blame for that they haven't found a house. What I don't do though is let them pick their next 3 houses without doing the regroup script. So we are stopping after 3. We are regrouping on what the criteria is, and then we're going to go back out. Now, Kathleen at the appointment will say, Jen's going to follow up with you. I'm so sorry nothing worked today. I know she'll find you a couple of other options. When can you go back out? So we're not letting them pick the houses without doing the regroup script, but we are forward pacing them to be back on our calendar. So if that's a Tuesday, Kathleen has them back on the calendar before the weekend. So we're pushing them through the funnel as fast as we can.
Okay. That's really cool. I love that in the regroup script, right? Like
regroup
that's
script.
a huge piece of one of the things that as you're talking, what keeps coming up is you have systems in place. Like this happens and then this happens. And if that doesn't happen, this happens.
That's exactly right. And there are not that many options. And people will say, well, buyers are liars. I can't keep control. No, that's not true. That's a bunch of hooey. That's the agent's fault.
Yeah, we didn't communicate well. Yeah.
You didn't ask the right questions. It's never a criteria issue. I mean, it's not that hard to get the criteria. How many bedrooms? How many bathrooms? What kind of land do you want to live on? What is the feel going to be? How much can you spend? Those are not the questions that you need to be worried about. That's going to come. It's the motivation. Are they genuinely a 30-day buyer, or are they further down the pipeline than you think they are? Either way is okay. We still want to service that buyer. But if they're 9 months down the road, I'm going to show up different than if they're 9 days down the road.
Yeah. No, that's huge. Now, so your showing agent, where did you find your showing agents?
So Kathleen was my first one, still with the team. She's actually our lead buyer specialist now. She was in private banking at my bank. So my lender, who also helps me with all of my stuff, he actually sent us her disc. It was before the KPAs, sent us her disc to verify it. They were going to offer her a management position. And he was like, hey, can you verify this for me? And our director of lead gen at the time, Emily, was like, I think should be a really great showing agent for Jen. So that's how we found her. He gave us his permission to, kind of woo her. And then Cindy, who's not with the team anymore, she was in sales. She sold security systems. And then she was with us for 2 years and then actually decided to take a step back and stay at home with her little one. And then Cody that we have now, and he's been with us that gap, those 2 years. He was the top salesman for Verizon for a 5-state area. So I taught a mastermind, or I don't know, you teach a mastermind, led a mastermind maybe, at our market center, and like 3 people showed up and he was one of them. And so I got to spend some extra time with him, and he asked the right questions. So the next day I called and was like, hey, have you thought about leaving your full-time job and actually jumping into real estate.
Okay, nice. Well, and so I know that one of the interesting, so I guess my next two questions are kind of go hand in hand. Sometimes it seems that people bring on help before that it's really necessary, so then they can't afford it. So then they do these weird, open a door or all the, like, there's tons of things that they do.
White.
Yeah. And so how did you know, okay, it's time to bring in another one? Or, bring in your first showing partner, and then, okay, now it's time to bring in the second. And and then you pay, and I love what you said earlier about it's not a less than position, right? I utilize the, professional baseball team. You have an amazing right fielder. They want to play right field and they're amazing at it, and they don't want to be your catcher or your pitcher.
That's right.
What does that look like for you when you, how did you know it was time to hire? And then how did you make sure that it was a win for them as well?
So how I knew it was time to hire was we talked about it, I was the ceiling. We were not going to grow on the buy side. So I was going to prevent growth for Dan, who had provided all this opportunity for me. And I was going to prevent opportunity for our director of lead gen at that time. She was building out her team. And I was like, okay, I finally can set aside my ego. I think there's ego involved with how many units can I do before I yell uncle. And I think that's potentially where I was at. So that was the first one. Well, the way I knew I needed the second one is we have this amazing thing going on. Kathleen's here, I know that I'm ready for her, because at that point I'm closing 10 to 11 units a month. And so I'm like, well, even if she could do half of them, I get some quality time back. She's going to do that. And then I looked at it different. I was like, well, I don't want quality time back, because I've got quality time. I've got a good schedule. Well, what if I could get it from 10 to 11 closings per month to 16 closings per month? Where do we reinvest that time that we're getting back? So Kathleen starts, well, our director of lead gen now has a whole other calendar to book up. So they are running through it, and they're setting appointments, and we're doing consults, and we're clicking, and everything's going well for about 5 months. And then in April, Dan decides that he's going to take, I think I want to say 50 listings in April. So he takes 50 listings in April. Well, guess what happens in May? The buy side explodes. We sold 36 houses in May. I had to get back into showings. Kathleen couldn't do all of it. Then I'm like, Kathleen it's a mess for her, because she needs me to negotiate her contract. She needs me to run her comps. I'm supposed to be calling these people, but I'm in showings. So the trigger for the second hire was, I got my job back, but I got my job back not because Kathleen wasn't performing. She was performing so well that our business exploded. So I was like, I'm doing her a disservice by not being available. I can't take all these calls because I'm back in showings. And I knew it worked, because January through April, it was wonderful. Things were great. She was making more money than she'd ever made before. I was making more money than I'd ever made before, because those numbers, when I talked about 10 or 11 per month, well, it wasn't I'm doing 5 and she's doing 5. What ended up happening was she was doing 8 or 9 and I was doing 5. So now we were up to like 13, 14 per month. So that was kind of the trigger for the second one, is holy Moses, I don't know what to do with this. So we'll get a second one. So we got the second one. And then what was the follow-up question of the part?
Oh, what's the win for them? So on that role, yeah.
So when I'm looking for the personality, I don't know that I'm looking for another me. I want to develop them into another me. But the personality I was looking for was somebody with a super high sense of urgency and a super high I. I wanted someone that when I was interviewing them, that I was like, I would like to spend more time with you. You're funny, you're nice, you're, attractive, you're all of these things, good inside and out, right? I wasn't looking for somebody that had a high drive, that was a high D, because I was like, well, I wasn't wanting to compete with them. I wanted them to be part of my team. So I did find people outside of the industry, because I didn't have to explain splits. They weren't expecting a certain commission. They had no real expectations. So I tried to match the job, which is showing property, and converting people at a high level with that personality. So when I looked at it, you know, a showing agent isn't just a door opener. They are an expert in the field. They know the market. They can create urgency. They can get people through that pipeline. So the win for them is I put them in their strength zone, and they had to do none of the other things. They didn't have to look at inspection reports. They didn't have to negotiate contracts. They had to deliver no bad news. You know, appraisal doesn't come in, or financing falls through, or whatever happens. They're in the joy-filled part of being the buyer's agent.
Now, I love it, the joy-filled part, and like you said, matching the behavioral style that makes sense. What besides showing the house, is there anything else that they're responsible for?
So they're lead nurturers. They're not lead generators. So anybody that is 30 days or under, they're staying on top of. They're doing that forward pacing. They're making sure that they're back on the calendar. They're making sure that they have a great consumer experience. They also host open houses. So they are required to bring in 2 leads per month, basically a net database per month, and 2 open houses per month. So they do have some requirements. The goal is, though, for them to be in showings for the largest percentage of their day.
Yeah. And that was, okay, so how, like right now with the number of units you're doing, how many showings are they typically doing in a day? How many consultations is typically happening?
So consults, the goal is for there to be 40 buyer appointments per month. So, you know, when you've got, right now we have 2.5 people. We've got Kathleen, and then we've got Jeremiah and Cody. So, I mean, they're doing a lot of consults. The pipeline is pretty big at this point. So, I mean, they each have a pipeline report. At any given time, they'll have anywhere from 5 to 7 A buyers, which is a 30-day buyer, no financing issue, no inventory issue. And then we'll have probably 3 or 4 that are 30-day buyers with an issue. I can send you a copy of what it looks like, so if people want to see that. But there'll be 3 to 4 that's like, maybe they've got to get something off their credit, or maybe it's an inventory issue, we can't find something. And then they'll have anything 60 days or over, we keep on their pipeline report so they know that they're there. However, that goes back to the lead generation department to make sure that nobody drops the ball.
Okay. And then how do they get paid? You had mentioned not having to go and explain those splits and things like that, because there isn't the expectation. I always, before you answer that question, we've talked about it with the coaching clients in my schedule. Most people get their real estate license and they're looking for that freedom, flexibility, and wealth, right? And yet we focus so much on the first 2, we don't get to the wealth. Mm-hmm. And when we get people from our industry, that's not to say that we can't ever do that. I think we're looking for somebody that wants freedom and flexibility, and then we want to put them into this role that we want them to work the way we work. And I think that becomes a challenge.
It is. And I think that it's, you know, I was in Gary's mastermind at Family Reunion. He said, hire people that aren't offended by how you work, right? Like how hard you work, what your atmosphere is. You know, like I said, my atmosphere here on Fridays is loud. So it's interesting though, the pitch came from opportunity. So I live in Springfield, Missouri. Median income is $35,000 a year. So for some of you, when we talk about how you pay someone, you have to take where I'm at into consideration for what you would offer someone, because you could very quickly overpay the role. So when I looked at it, you know, our average sales price right now is $185,000. When I was hiring showing agents, though, it was $165,000. So what we looked at was, how do I make somebody's life better than what it is, and put them into a brand new industry that they don't know anything. So Kathleen is the easiest example. She was working at the bank, and she was making somewhere between $30,000 and $35,000 a year. And she had a steady job, right? She had banking holidays. She worked from, 8 to 5 or 8 to 4, and it was pretty easy. So I'm like, I'm going to rock her world with nights and weekends. What does this need to look like? So I offered her a base salary. So the base salary is not much. It's $18,000 a year. but it's enough that people aren't totally freaking out when they first start and they have no income coming in. Now, on the buy side, if you bring somebody in, they should be in production and have a closing within their first 45 days, is my opinion. Because if they're shadowing me and we get something under contract, I'm paying them. I'm going to fast track them into production. So then the other part of it was, how am I going to bonus her? How am I going to make sure that this is worthwhile? So I think a lot of people pay 10% of the buy side commission. We ended up doing 12.5% because our average sales price was so low. And my coach at the time was like, this is a high turnover position, and I didn't want to have to train that many people. And so I was like, how do I make this worth her while? So when I brought her in, I said, okay, we'll do $18,000 a year, and your average sales price will probably be $150,000. Because in my mind, I was like, well, her average sales price may drop. I don't know what's going to happen. So 12.5% of $150,000 average sales price from the 3% commission works out to be like $550. Well, I knew what my pipeline was, and I knew she could close 5 a month. So I did the math with her, and I said, okay, if you close 5 a month and you get an average bonus of X, 500 and some dollars, so you have 60 closings in a year plus this $18,000, it should work out to be around $48,000 a year. And I don't know, you may sell more houses, your average price point might be higher. I don't know, but this is my conservative guess of what happens. Well, she ended up selling more houses. She sold like 70 some houses. Her average sales price didn't drop, so the bonuses were higher. And I think that first year she made 60 grand. So we had almost doubled her, not quite doubled her income. And I was really careful with her schedule. So the win for her was she was making more money than she'd ever made. And she wasn't working 5 nights a week and both days of the weekend. At that time, she and I were a team. So before I got the second showing agent, if she worked Monday, Wednesday night, I was still used to working nights, right? I worked Tuesday, Thursday, and we could alternate stuff on the weekends so that she had quality of life. And then when I brought the second showing agent in, we just did the opposite schedule.
Okay. Very cool. So and the cool part is, even in most teams, there's always turnover. And I think that sometimes people forget that there's always turnover, sometimes for great reasons. Like, hey, they graduate, like now they're apps. Like, we want
that's awesome.
Yeah. And what you're describing though, isn't that like you're being very purposeful with the hiring. You're being very purposeful with your leadership and with the training, so that it's not like, 10 people to get to one.
No, we have very little on the buy side, specifically, very little turnover. I mean, I don't think there's been anybody in that position under maybe right at 2 years is the quickest turnover. And that was also a good reason. There wasn't a negative that happened with any of that.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. So, and what I'm hearing too is we have such a huge opportunity, even if we're just, because it's a team within a team, even if you're an individual agent, you can learn so much from what you just shared about basically earning the right to get to next, and the systems and creating it like a business. So that's really cool. So if I want to be like Jen when I grow up, and I want to learn from you, what, I know that you have, there's an opportunity for people that would like to get more engaged in this. Will you tell us a little bit about that? The program?
Oh yeah. Okay, good. I wasn't sure.
Y'all want to shadow you. Can we all, like, I want to make a field trip. Like, if we loaded up, say, came to Springfield, Missouri and did a field trip, would that be cool?
Totally fine. You'd be a little disappointed now though, because I'm the CEO, so I don't actually go on showings, and I'm in like my Converse tennis shoes and a t-shirt today. So you might be a little disappointed today. I think, so I have got a group program. So I am not a one-on-one coach with MAPS, but I am a group coach with MAPS because they're afraid to let me loose, with one person at a time. So it launches March 25th. So we've got the next one, Sarah Detmore, who is a one-on-one coach. She co-coaches with me, and it's basically both of our journeys. So she's the VP of outside sales for the Loken Group. And it's basically both of our journeys of, okay, here's how we built out this team within a team and the thought process behind it. If I were going to give an individual agent that's not a buyer's agent a piece of advice, it would be listen to those objections really hard, whether they're from your team or whether they're from your clients. Typically, when you get the same question over and over and over again, that's a shortcoming in your explanation or your presentation, whether you're presenting to your team members or you're presenting to clients. That's how we come up with our objection handlers, right? Because if we know that, okay, this question keeps coming back up and this thing keeps happening and I can't get my buyers to only look at 3 houses, there's something along the way, or a team member where you're like, we're going through 10 to get to 1. Okay, well, let's stop the loop and let's figure out what that is. And those are probably the best scripts and objection handlers we've ever come up with.
Okay, awesome. And I will say I have had the opportunity to go through your course, and unbelievable. It's just really, really cool. Yeah. And it's just a lot of it, the mindset stuff. And then this is how to do it. Cause like you said, it before what you're sharing, people hear, oh, we can do this. They don't know. And then as Gary talked about, we tend to ask other people, how'd you do that? Not looking necessarily as, have you been able to do it successfully and sustain it?
And
you have to do both.
And to duplicate it. I mean, people are like, well, you must be a machine. You sold 100+ houses. So did Kathleen. I mean, not only did I do it, the person that came right behind me did it. That's the benefit of having a great team and having great systems. And I think the way that I look at it on the buy side is it's the same as on the listing side. It's the MREA, right? So I think the thing that I hear the most is people are like, a good buyer's agent can sell 35 to 50 units. Yeah, absolutely. That's amazing. And that's not to discount anything. And why can't they sell more? Why does it have to be that they graduate into a listing agent role? We can do this on the buy side too. I think it's just people get to that 35 to 50 units and chaos sets in and they're like, I'm done with showings. I'm going to hire a showing agent. But if you don't have the admin first and you have the showing agent, and the showing agent needs disclosures or covenants and restrictions, you become the admin if you don't have one. And then on the
what we don't want and drains our energy, and
it's not your strength zone. And then if you don't have the lead generation piece of it or the lead follow-up piece of it, you don't have a pipeline big enough to have a great showing agent, because my goal is for them to make as much money as they can. If I'm scrounging around to find 1 to 2 buyers a month for myself, what am I going to give them?
There's not a big enough. Yeah.
There's not a big enough pipeline. And I think, that's the thing that part of the reason I do the group program is I'm like, it's easier to impact a lot of people at once. And it's a message that's a good message to get out. And the buy side is my favorite side. So
love that. I so appreciate you. We've got a few more minutes with Jen, and I know I've asked a lot of questions. Amanda or Anya, Jonathan, do you guys have a question for Jen maybe that I didn't address or just need to get deeper on?
Yeah, so my question is, when I'm looking at your standards, it looks like bringing in 2 leads and hosting 2 open houses a month. Other than that, what's the standards that you have? Is there any sort of like what an ideal week looks like coming into the office? What does that look like for the way that you built yourself and your buyers team out?
So that's a great question. So the standards around closing, so it's a minimum standard to have 5 closings a month to be on our team, and that's list side or buy side. Conversion rate on the buy side, it's a minimum standard of 70%. So because keep in mind, we're providing 80% of their leads. So I'm looking at what their conversion is, and I'm looking at it based on what source it is. So is it a sign call, repeat referral, those types of things? Some of those are easier to convert than others. So yeah, the standards are when they join our team, they add 200 people to our database. So any person that comes on, that's admin, that's lead gen, that's production, they bring in a database of 200 people, and then they add 2 per week, and then 2 open houses a month. So I may not have said the 2 per week part right. They add 2 per week, 2 leads per week. And then the 5 closings a month. So we look at fall through ratio pretty carefully. So industry standard is somewhere around 10%. I'm okay at around 12% because the unit count that we do, happens. There was a year that was like 15%, and that was real rough. So, sometimes you don't know your standards till something like that happens. So yeah, the first year, if it makes you feel better, the year that we closed 223 units the first time, we had 37 fall through. So I have had lots of failure too. We're just talking about the successes today.
Well, you can't experience the failures unless you're on the court making things happen. So that's really cool.
It was
Yeah.
terrible. I mean, we were slinging deals, but it was, and I don't know that we lost all of those 37 people, but I mean, I think that year we actually put 290 under contract, 223 closed, 37 fell through, and the balance moved, closed the following year.
Mm-hmm.
But you want to look at 290 home inspections, that could kill a person.
Yeah, no kidding. My other question is, it sounds like the splits, like what you're paying them in, or what they're earning, I should say. It sounds like that doesn't change whether they bring somebody in, if it's a listing, if it's a buyer, personal, sphere. Does any of that? Okay, it does change. Okay.
I'm sorry. Yes, that's a great question. So if you sent me a referral, I would, typical is 25%. So if somebody brings in a sphere, and I had this question last night, I think it was actually on the Mastery post, and then we had some offline conversation, we'll pay 25%. If our team member, if a buyer agent or a showing agent brings in a listing lead, and it is truly from their sphere, family member or close friend, absolutely I'm going to pay them the referral fee, right? I wouldn't have had that business otherwise. Now, if they generate a lead, so say one of my showing agents goes on an open house or goes to an open house and picks up a listing lead and brings it back to the team, we do give the lead generation bonus, which is 5%. Because I would pay the lead generator the 5%. I'm happy to pay my agents the 5%.
Okay, so that's on top of what they're earning.
That's
Okay.
right. So, but like, for example, so like say Cody's at 12.5% on the buy side, but he brings in a listing lead. When that listing closes, because we have to pay on company dollar. So once it closes, he would get 5% of that listing closing.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Did I say that right? Okay.
Yeah, no, that helps me with kind of looking at those numbers and, bringing in business, because obviously there's got to be some sort of standard with that. And so breaking that down.
Yeah. And I think there were some, the lady that I was talking to last night, she and I are pretty good friends. And she was like, one of her coaches said that it should be somewhere around 10%. So I would talk to your coach about where your cost of sale is and make sure that it works for you. I just know that we don't have like a run on people bringing in their sphere. So when they do, I like to make a big deal about it. And I wish they would do it more, so I had to worry about cost of sale.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. And I just have one more question. I won't hog all the rest of the time.
Ask away.
So I think it starts with me having the less than position.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that starts with me, because that was one of the conversations that Olivia and I had with, is this person in a temporary position? Are they going to move up? Where do you see this role? And I think that it started with me saying, okay, well, my outlook on the position. So what are some of your, I liked how, you brought in that they're an empire builder. It's not a less than position. Do you have any, insight on how to kind of change the mindset or change how I look at it? Or is that discussed in the program?
Are you the rainmaker or are you the buyer's agent?
Nope, I'm neither.
What role are you?
So I am, so right now I'm in a team within a team, and I'm building out where I intend to have a buyer's agent, showing specialist underneath of myself, so that I can focus on the listings.
Okay. I think it does start with you. And
Yes.
There were loads of hires that I did not do it well with. So, I mean, we have highlighted success today, but there was one showing agent that I tried before Kathleen was successful, and she rolled her eyes at me and I let her go. So, I mean, there loads of mistakes have been made. It does start with you, and it's when you're ready to win through others. And I think that's the easiest way I could explain it. So Dan's coach, she was very instrumental in all this, and she explained this as a story to me where basically, when you want to go up a ladder, you have to move up to the next rung. But all of those rungs, if they represent work or responsibility or something, as you move up, those still need to be done. Right. And that doesn't mean that they're not important. They're the foundation of your business. They're potentially more important than what you're getting ready to go do. So when you find the person that you're like, I trust you with this part, I think that's the mindset shift. That's I love this person. I love their family. I'm invested in them. Their wins are my wins. So it got to the point where, my ego did have to get smaller so that, the clients, they don't want to talk to me that much anymore. They much prefer Kathleen and Cody. They just do. And that's the win now. I don't have hurt feelings over it, where that comes with some maturity, because, there are times where but these people I built my business on, you'll know you have the right person when you're really confident in giving them your sphere.
Yeah.
Did that answer the question?
Yeah, for sure. It definitely did. Well, and I can relate because I started as an ISA.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know some people look at that position as a stepping stone, but no, I know that can be its own. So changing my mindset to also, look at that showing specialist, look at that buyer's agent as, somebody that it's a key player and they're owning that position. So.
That's right. And you'll know you have the right person. Some of it is your mindset, and then some of it is finding the person that's going to take it and run with it. I was on a call with Jordan Freed, and, I said something like that. And he was like, I said, I was so lucky that Dan gave me this opportunity. And he was like, you were lucky that he gave you the opportunity, and he was lucky that you took it.
Yeah.
Right. So that's part of it. It has to work both ways. You have to give the opportunity, but there do have to be the accountability and standards in place so that person owns the role.
Yeah. Perfect. Awesome. I'm so excited for this course that's coming up. I'm
6
very
weeks
excited.
Of all of my gibberish. A lot.
No, well, and it will take a lot off Olivia's plate, because this is a conversation that we're consistently having, and she's like, have you reached out to Jen? Have you reached out to Jen?
Good. Well, I'm glad to help.
Yeah.
Well, the interesting thing is you're you should be extremely tired of me, Jen, because I can't tell you how many times I've said, JenDavis, she's on Facebook, go find her. She
I love it.
And then people don't, and I'm like, ugh. Okay. So last couple minutes, John and Anya, are you guys on? Do you have any questions? Jonathan, do you have any questions? We can't hear you, Jonathan. Hold on. Let me unmute you. Okay, go ahead.
I don't have any questions. I mean, I know I was late coming into this, but I got some really great notes. A lot of questions answered. I don't have anything right now.
Okay.
I also know you, Jonathan. So if you did have a question, you can just call.
Yeah. I think it'd be great if his whole team came in and shadowed you guys, and maybe even vice versa, because you guys are at y'all hit a little over 250 last year. It was him, 2 agents, and 2 admin.
Right.
So
That's awesome.
and he is a listing machine. It's ridiculous. But both of his agents, one did 80 last year. One was the first year she did 42, and this year she'll do 76. I think I saw Ariel. Any questions from you, Ariel?
I was in a closing, so I didn't get to listen to it.
Okay.
Hi.
I'm going to chat with John about his notes for sure.
All right. And we've got it recorded, so I'll send that to you.
Awesome.
And I think Jonathan might have been at the only bold I've ever attended.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm
Yeah.
sorry about that.
Oh, yeah, y'all missed that conversation with Jen and me around Bold right before.
How many times did I say but? Did you count?
Yeah, no. All right. So again, if you are interested in the course, I'm highly going to suggest, there's a certain courses, to me, Perfect Real Estate Assistant. Everybody should go through that, because if you don't have an assistant, you are one. You need to understand what that role looks like. And then the next piece would be, because it's typically, right, we're going to get our executive admin in place, and then we're going to be looking at building out that buy side. If we don't know how to do it, you will do what I've done and so many of us, and blow it up and then blow it up. And blow it up. So this is a great way to plug in, because, and even like what Amanda was talking about, a lot of times what happens is you know, my job as your coach is for you to like go to a training and then I can coach you around it.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, what happens is instead of coaching you, we're taking our time to train you, and that's not the best use of this. So this gives us a huge opportunity of leverage right here. So, Jen, I so appreciate your time so very much.
You're welcome.
I will be sharing this with lots of people, and probably retaking your course again this round. Like it was very impactful. So yeah.
Well, thank you. And it's new information. It's all, I mean, there's a lot of similarities. Sarah just adds she's really way more direct than I am. And so she dives really deep into sources and scripts around different sources and door knocking and like more of the tactical stuff. So it's a really good hybrid.
Okay. Awesome. All right. Well, awesome. Well, I so appreciate you. Bottom of my heart. Like this is amazing. I can't tell you how many notes that I took. I know that the ladies and gentlemen on here appreciate this so much. So have an amazing day, amazing Friday.
Thank you. Bye guys.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
You're welcome.